Welcome, welcome, welcome to another Knocked Conscious. I have a good friend here, new friend, but a new old friend. So, Mark Maresca, welcome from the White Pillbox. That was a Jason Drop the Mask original intro, my friend. It's the same outro, but that was his. So, he did one for you. You had him on your show. How amazing is
Yes.
that intro? It's just a beautiful thing.
That intro was awesome, colorful, peppy, right in the face. I love it. Jason is awesome. Awesome.
He's talented. He's
Yeah,
talented.
I'm telling
I
you.
knew I
Yeah.
knew he was gonna I knew I was lucky to have the chance to work with him for even the time that we did. I mean, maybe we
Yeah.
didn't done 10 or 15 episodes, but so grateful. And hopefully when he gets settled in a little bit, he'll come back and dip his toe back
I
in
hope.
because I just like
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
ideas, like his thoughts.
Yeah.
And I like
Yeah. No.
yours.
Yeah.
So Mark, welcome back.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, just for the not conscious audience. They don't know you, but if they watch If I Whiskey, I'm sure they know you as well.
Sure. No problem. Yes, I am the host. I'm Mark Maresca is my name. And I am the host of the White Pillbox. It's a podcast that I started probably a year and a half or so ago, which followed on the tail of a Substack article series that I had for now for 4 or 5 years. And I'm basically an anarcho-capitalist. I am the reason that I call it the white pill box is because I like to focus on real world reasons for hope. And I mean that in every sense of that word, real world reasons. I don't have optimism because I just happen to have a happy go lucky attitude. I try to look for actual empirical and logical evidence in the world and look at trends that are real and try to see if there are white pills in there. White pills meaning reasons for hope, reasons that as bad as things may be right now, that we are headed toward what I expect is going to be eventually a free society. That's a society without statism. That's decades and decades off, but I don't know if it's all that many decades off. So that's basically the long and short of my white pill box podcast series.
So we probably didn't talk about it. So if by whiskey and with Jake, we probably all have different energies and like we just talk about different things. But the way you just
Yes.
described that, that makes me think about a lot of Steven Pinker's work.
Okay.
Did you look at a lot of Steven Pinker's work? Or are you familiar with his work at all about
Not a
how
whole lot,
overall
although the
they're
name
much
rings a
better?
bell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So basically, think he it's really weird because he's a reason guy. Like it's reason, but it's like reason to a fault, also almost an
Okay.
intellectual left kind of thing. But it's like,
Yeah.
but it's also smart. You know what I mean? It's something that you have to add to the collective. But we talk about like famines down, even though okay, climate's change, but we are dying less. We're prepared more. You know what I mean? We have
Right.
better, things
Right.
like that. So
Right.
do you approach the white pill from out just a philosophical perspective, or do you see it because you say real world, but real world philosophically, or do you see it actually in a practical sense of the way the world just generally is moving as well anyway, even though we're shown the bad stuff all the time?
That's a really, really good way to start the framing, and I think you kind of hit on it right there at the end. I guess the way I approach it is I'm not as focused on the short term. So basically, it's a short term versus long term perspective. So just so we're clear, I absolutely acknowledge that in the short run, in the immediate, right in front of our noses, really, really, really bad things happen because of statism. And by the way, I am a 50-year anarcho-capitalist. I've been in this 50 years. So I can promise you that for a half a century, I have been quite aware of all the bad, bad things that happen day after day after day. So just want to clear, I am not a pie in the sky person whose eyes are so glazed over that I don't see what's happening. I see it. But I can't do anything about those in the moment. I can't save those poor people who recently have been murdered by the ICE thugs. I can't do anything about that. But what I can notice are long-term trends because what I value is the hope that not today, but tomorrow, metaphorically tomorrow, things will be better. Now, that's just an optimistic statement. I don't want to rest on that. I want to look for real world reasons, real world trends that strongly and tangibly suggest that tomorrow, not tomorrow. I don't mean Wednesday. I mean sometime in the future that is plausibly in our near future. Things are not going to be like this, that these very problems we see will either be greatly reduced or vanished. So I do try to use a grounded approach, but I am near future oriented. And just so we're clear, when I say future, I say no more than a half a century. I'm talking about 40, 50 years, and I think things will be tangibly better. But I realize by saying that, I'm not backing it up. There's takes a lot of thinking and analysis and thought, but real world thinking, real world evidence. So I hope that kind of answers my distinction between white pill and black pill.
It certainly does, and I appreciate that. And before we continue, only because YouTube hates us so much, let's say allegedly murdered by ICE thugs. Well,
Mm,
you have no idea, Mark. You have no idea the strike that we got that I had
yeah,
to go. We had listen to this. We had redacted news. We had Clayton Morris and Natalie Morris of Redacted News. Amazing conversation. They have 2.85 million subscribers on YouTube. Clayton made a statement about 9/11, about the government being part of it, and we got a strike. And we have 20 subscribers on our channel.
wow.
20. Okay. This is the joke that is like, I'm just watching all this weird stuff because I love the way you approach this, but we're seeing the technique part and the technocracy part really play a
Yeah.
role in our impact. I did this weird grok analysis and it says something like my analysis is like 65 to 80% of my stuff is reduced or reduced reach. So like I
Yes.
can't get outside my 2,178 followers. And you're like, hello, what and I'm not one of these spilled milk people at all. You got to earn it. Maybe that was the thing. Maybe I don't have it, but in light of these things that I'm starting to come across, it feels like this real uphill battle. What are your thoughts on that, being a white pill podcast that's growing in this sea of things that are kind of pushing against your liberty minded narrative, I guess? And I don't want to say
Yeah,
narrative because
that's
it's philosophy. I don't want to say narrative because it's not.
sure, sure. No, that's fine. That's fine. And you're absolutely right. We unfortunately have to be conscious of what we're saying. So just before when I used that M word, I wasn't actually thinking about that at the moment because my my passion for this issue and my anger at it did come up. So that is what
And
came
we do
out.
the same. And you get
And
grace here. You are welcome to say what you I will never tell. So I will take strikes all day before I reduce someone's speech. I will never get
That's
it.
okay.
So
But even there though, it's let's say it's wise and tactful, let's say, to make sure that if we're going to use terms like that, we at least try to communicate the idea, but maybe use them in terms that perhaps the strikes will be minimized. So we can definitely set our minds to doing that. It's not that hard to do. It's sad we have to do it, but it's sort of a wise thing because let's face it, if our audience still gets the same message, even though it might not be as fiery or passionate, let's do it that way because we also don't want to just end up as irrelevant. So
right.
yeah, that I
Well,
think that's a
I'm
good
happy to
point you
call it
brought up.
as on its face, it's a state overreach. That I mean, at minimum,
Yes,
we'll call that on every case that we've discussed. It's an overreach of
right,
the state in some way,
right, right.
and
And
that's
really
to
what
the
counts,
go-
yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead. What really counts?
I was just going to say what really counts though, of course, is not necessarily what you see or what I see personally. It's the sense we're getting from the general environment that these kind of videos that show those particular things that happened recently, those are spreading very fast. So though, if you just sort of stop there at what I just said about the fact that these videos are spreading, you're seeing them on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. That's not the same thing that sort of happened in these previous crises. We didn't necessarily see these things so quickly and so broadly at the early stages of these crackdowns. That's a
Right.
white pill. Why? Because it exemplifies a trend from less awareness to more awareness, slower awareness to more rapid fire awareness. That is something that I would classify as a white pill. That's how I determine white pills, noticing those trends. Just wanted to
Okay,
throw that
that's
out
an
there.
interesting way to look at that too, because let's use the shot heard around the world. took like 9 months, right, to make it literally around the world or whatever that time
Yes.
frame the scuttlebutt
Great,
happened. But
great
we
analogy.
literally had someone crash land. I remember a landing that overextended the runway in San Francisco, and they had that video up
Yes.
like while it was
Yeah.
happening or like almost
Hmm.
right after. It was like, what the heck? So to your point, that is the and once again, we will definitely look at the plus sides. We do have to be aware of all the fabrications of the videos that are and and the virality and how they're getting spread, who's spreading them, because we're finding now this, X was recently exposed as like really being a state actor here. So the algorithm is designed to push certain things. Did you hear this latest TikTok algorithm thing? What happened
Yes. Just a few hours ago,
this
I
week?
think I saw that.
Yeah,
Right.
any direct message to another person with the word Epstein in it was immediately struck. You're not
Right.
allowed to type the word Epstein. And
Right.
all of a sudden, certain things got 0 views. Oh, yeah, server error. Oh, sure, sure.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
the error
And
was Larry Ellison. That was the server error,
I want
right?
you to notice
Like,
something here. So let's practice what we just learned in this
y-
white pill lesson,
yes,
okay?
yeah,
Ask
let's do it.
yourself the question, when did TikTok get taken over by this most recent owner? Approximately when did that happen?
About a week or so
Ab-
ago, 2 weeks
About
ago.
a week or so ago. A week later, everyone knows that X is tamping down content. This is something we typically would not have found out for in the old newspaper days, decades. In
Right.
the early internet, years. We found out in a week. And it's not Mark telling Mark this. Everyone's finding out about this. Really bad advertising for X and
That's a
X's
great point.
and X's advertisers who are none of these people are going to like that. So you see, that's what I mean by trends. Whereas if you take these, examples and then put them together, you could say, all right, that would suggest that this is not sustainable, that X has to change its algorithms or lose market share to whoever, Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels, because those providers are going to say, huh, X just lost a lot of people because of tamping down content. Maybe if I open up content, I'll get more business. So you see, these dynamics work in the real time, even though the specific example of X tamping things down is on its face a black pill.
Right. No, so that's a beautiful way to talk about it being exposed. And that's Epstein and all the news that we're getting is getting immediately vetted, good or bad, however you want to. There is no real good or bad. There
Yes.
is no good or bad information, really. There's incorrect information. I mean, some people send it deviously, so the intent's bad, but like the information itself is just something to be vetted. It is whatever ones and zeros or just data that you need to sift through. And watching this though, watching the Twitter files get exposed, and then Elon talk about freedom of speech, buying it for freedom of speech. Really, it's the data mine because he knows if your speech is suppressed, you're not going to speak on it. So he opened that up just to get Grok a better language model. To be completely honest, that's really why
I
he
think
opened it
so.
up. If
I
you're if
do.
you're thinking anything differently, yeah, you could sprinkle speech in there, but really, I heard the FAGGOT word. That part I've seen everybody get immediately stricken for that. Like limited reach emails or whatever. It's like, okay,
Right.
sure.
Right.
Let's play that game. It's like, so it's an interesting place we're at.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
So
Yeah,
how
I'm
about how about
encouraged.
with CBS? Yeah, and like CBS getting bought up. Barry Weiss. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is unbelievable. These things that are happening. But good news is, legacy media is definitely dying. To your point, this technological way of getting information differently.
Exactly. I love that particular aspect of it. I just think this is one of the most profound white pills out there, and that is that the CBSs, the NBCs, what we call traditional media, corporate media, mainstream media, although they're not mainstream anymore, they have lost market share astoundingly. They are basically on the verge of just collapsing. If you look at their content viewership by age group, that tells you everything you need to know. Their average age viewer is 70 years old, the average age group. Anyone over 65, 70, 75, yeah, they're probably still watching, sort of. But under that age group, they, they could spell it only because it's so easy to spell CBS, ABC. But that's it. So
I
they are
heard I heard
dinosaurs.
something. Yeah, I do call it the dinosaur media as well. I love calling it that because they're going to be turned into fossil fuel before we know it, which isn't even a thing. Anyway, oh, that's a whole other thing. But to your point, it's something. There was something about an ad executive saying is like they're too old to be strong enough to push the change channel button on the remote. That's their demographic. Is that they're
I
like
love
too
it.
feeble to like literally change the channel.
And
Uh,
imagine anybody over 70, 75 years old when they're watching their TV, at some point along the way, they're going to press that button, and what are they going to get? They're going to get that old style grid. Remember the grid?
mhm. Yeah.
It's got the stations on the left and the
Uh,
time of day on the right.
yeah,
They
the little
still,
TV guide.
that's it. They still depend on that. They're comforted by that. They want to know what they can watch and when they can watch it. That's the mindset of the boomer and older generation. Maybe a few Gen X's, I suppose, but I can hardly believe that. They're the ones who are keeping CBS and NBC and ABC and Fox alive. The rest, you can't even imagine them barely caring about what this grid looks like. They consume content when they want, where they want, what they want, and to hell with all the rest of it. And they'll change on a dime. This is a wonderful white pill because it means that the propaganda that the government tries to push, oh, they're going to engage in it all right. They're going to yell it out from the steps of the Capitol, the steps up there as loud as they want. The problem is people ain't hearing it as much, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. So let's dig a little bit into this. So I've been wanting to listen to your series, and I haven't gotten to all parts, but you have a 23 part series called Myth of Authority. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that? When you recorded it, what compelled you to do it? Like, how did you kind of work that out? Just a little bit before we continue with that, because I found it really
Sure.
interesting.
So my one of the big insights for me over the last maybe 10 years was that the state itself, government, is not the problem. It's not the problem. Now, we as libertarians and anarchists would probably disagree with that. They'd say, no, no, the state is the problem. It's the whole problem. Nope, it's not the problem. It's merely the outward result, the effect of the core problem, the root problem, which is the belief or myth of political authority, the belief in the minds of the majority, the vast majority of people, that it is legitimate to have a ruling class of people who may force the rest of us to follow their rules, regulations, and so on, whether we like it or not. In other words, the myth of authority is the belief that we must defer our own moral sensibilities to a ruling class. Well, that's the root of the state. And it's the root of the state precisely because you can't have the state unless you have a ubiquitous myth of authority. When, when that dawned on me, maybe some 8 years ago, and by the way, that's thanks to primarily to the content of Larkin Rose and his book, The Most
Right.
Dangerous Superstition.
And before we continue, remember, you're
Yeah,
in this 50 years in this
yeah,
general philosophy of
right,
understanding with
right.
Rothbard and Mises and Spooner
Yes,
and all et al, like Hayek and
yeah,
Hazlitt and all these people, right? So
exactly
you've been
right.
doing it for 42 years, and this other epiphany comes in from some other way, which once again, Larkin
Right.
you mentioned, which is a great person. I watched your interview, the two-parter with him as well. So please continue. I just want to say that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is good. Is Robert Kiyosaki good? Is that a good thing? Do I sound like that? I sound like him? Is it a good thing? I don't know what's going on with that. So
Maybe a
thank
little.
you.
Yeah.
Regardless, the comment. And also ruling class is like the board of directors in a corporation. That's not
Now
that
let's be
different. Oligarchy, right? We talk about.
That's
Thank
quite
you for
different because
contributing that, Ken.
right. Remember the board of directors in a corporation are nonetheless selected voluntarily by the consent of the stockholders. That is not how politics works. So there's a fundamental difference there. So 42 years in, 8 years ago, and By the way, that does not discount the philosophy and the material and the morality and all the other
This
thinking
is a
of
growth.
libertarianism.
It's a constant
Correct.
evolution. There look, you
Exactly.
hit an epiphany and you're going to hit another one. You're going to hit this other wall that you're going to have to break through and you don't even know it's there yet. It's on the horizon and it's further down.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly,
just
Mark. That
that's where
that's
we're
what
at. So
growth
yeah,
is.
please continue. And so off the top, what you're saying is the state is actually the effect of the cause, which is just having the belief that we need these people to govern us in a way.
Right, right. Now, there is a connection there. It's a root cause, as I said. Um, and the the Myth of Authority series that I that you referenced goes into exactly how that happens. So it's not enough, especially if we're philosophers or thinkers, it's not enough to say the myth of authority is the root cause of the state and leave it there because that would make it merely an assertion. So I devote an entire episode to the actual step by step process by which this ubiquitous belief in the legitimacy of political rulers actually ends up forming and persisting the state. So I want to make it clear it's not just an assertion. In any case, when this, let's say, epiphany came to me, that clarified why 40 or so years of libertarian efforts always failed. Because strategically, they focused on the state as the problem. They were battling the state. It's like taking a cancer and trying to take an aspirin. They really weren't getting to the root of it.
Well, to your
It's like
point,
try,
if I may,
yeah.
right at this
Mhm.
point, this is they would get into politics and try to work within the system, like say a Thomas Massey, right?
Correct.
But the system is built already. The system changes
Yes.
you. You do not change. Thomas Massey talked about it. It's literally built into the architecture. You have this room you can hang out in or that room. There isn't another hangout room. There isn't like 18 rooms. It's two places and you're ostracized from one or the other or both in his case, right?
Mhm.
And you find this happening. It's built into it, this binary system that we have.
Exactly. Exactly. And all of that, the two branches of that system are, as you said before, as part of the effect. It's part of the outcome. It's the end result of the belief in authority. Now, how the belief in authority specifically manifests itself, well, that could be in 1,000 ways. 4,000 years ago, one way it manifested was with pharaohs in Egypt. The myth of authority environment was conducive to that form of ruling elite. Today, we don't have an environment that is conducive to that particular style of ruling elite. Our environment of the myth of authority lends itself to a democratic republic sort of flavor of myth of authority, except over in North Korea, where their myth of authority manifests in a communist dictatorial sort of ruling elite. So this
You
is
leave
why you
that
have
man alone.
different,
He got 19 holes in one in an 18-hole golf course one
and
time. You do not.
none of his holds were his butt, because I understand he does not have a butthole. That is actually a belief over there in North
Wow,
Korea.
that is amazing. Anyway, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
but that's how that myth of authority even translates there. My bigger point, though,
Right.
is that once I realized that some 8 years ago, it was clear why the libertarian strategic efforts would always fail because they're attacking the effect, not the cause. So to me, I started writing my Substack and trying to explain why to the libertarians, to the already red pilled, that maybe if you shifted your focus away from the state as much and really focused it more on the myth of authority, try to find ways to undermine the belief in authority, you might have more success in doing that. And then I started to explore psychological scholarship in the libertarian sphere online. I tried to find any thinker who had done psychological um, thinking or studying regarding the belief in authority because I was highly curious what psychologists had to say about it. And once again, Larkin Rose had been the only one who really said
Milgram
anything about it.
experiment.
The Milgram experiment was definitely a good example of why it happens, but it wasn't from
Right.
a
But it
libertarian standpoint.
Certainly not. No, it was actually from a guinea pig standpoint. But yeah, but yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
that's a good
Absolutely.
point.
It's just one that comes to me when I think of that. But yeah, and once again, this is a one-off thing, not a general push like you're talking about dissecting it as a whole and in from many angles.
Correct. It's Milgram definitely uncovered a very key point, namely that we defer to authority largely because we are influenced by symbols, rituals, things like a symbol would be like the doctor in the lab coat. He had a white lab coat on and he was standing over there watching. And they are, we tend to be deferential to authority figures. So when the doctor in the experiment said, keep pressing a buzzer, which is going to deliver a shock to a subject, they kept doing it because you obey authority, not because their moral sense kicked in and said, I'm not going to hurt someone. These are some of the lessons of the Milgram experiment. So all of these are illustrative of why psychology is largely at the root of our belief in authority. And I wanted to see if libertarians would be like sort of open to the idea of maybe shifting their strategy. Since I didn't find any psychologists out there that I was able to find that actually studied this from the point of view of libertarianism, about why the myth of authority translates to the state and so on, finally I said, well, I'm going to do it myself. I'm just going to think up, where can I find material on this, study it, think about it, and reason it out as best I could. And since I was starting off, where I had already started the Substack essay series, I thought, well, let me do it by audio podcast. So I dove in with the intent that I would uncover the ins and outs of the psychology of the belief in authority and hopefully eventually come out with enough of a sustained and reasoned argument that it might persuade other libertarian communicators to shift their focus. That was my intent. So I go through the series. Each one, I'm making notes. I do my audio as I'm going. I'm thinking as I go. So this was not like a book where you write it ahead of time and release it when it's done. I was learning on the fly as we go. About halfway through, which I didn't know would be halfway through, I never knew how long it was going to be. It just was supposed to be 4 episodes, to be honest, at first. And here I am at the 10th or 11th. And I start to realize, based on the insights that I'm going to say stumbled on because I did not form them. I didn't create them. I found them when I just put pieces together. I realized, holy moly, the nature of the myth of authority, propaganda, and the state leads me to conclude that we have already started the transition to a free society. Granted, we're at the baby steps, but it has started, and it has started sustainably. Well, halfway through, I'm, releasing these episodes and I'm finding more insights and it's solidifying this insight. And I'm realizing that libertarian outreach efforts are not part of that equation. They're not why we've started the transition to a free society. We've started it because of psychological dynamics and technology. It's it's
Would
happening
you
and
call it
it's sustainable.
cyclical? Cuz it literally just ran through my head because this is what I'm
Okay.
thinking.
Yeah.
Once again, there's so many cycles. We talk about the fourth turning, contrative cycle, and all the
Yes.
so many things.
Yes.
I would argue, early revolutionary, right? Post revolutionary days, everybody's liberty minded, minding their own business. As they got less and less, as they got more busy with their lives and got less concerned with the state, that allowed
Yes.
the state to get, to inch away power over time. It then overreaches a point where it collapses under its own weight. And then we reset. We have the free society, but is it sustainable in that way? Now, I'm not arguing it is or isn't. That's kind of what I'm seeing is this is a constant cycle that always needs to be defended. It's almost like it has to happen that way. Like it's so matrixy, the Merovingian, everything happening before and causality and talking about it's just this very interesting thing how all these ideas and philosophies parallel this cyclical kind of fashion.
Yes.
Just curious of your thoughts if that crossed your your mind on it at all.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because that is something that we should address. So first, I'm going to change the phrasing a little. When we say cyclical, it's very, very easy for our mind to instantly look at that and say, oh, I know what Mark means by that. What he means, and I'm not saying you're saying this, Mark, I'm saying
Right,
it's
right. Yeah,
easy for a
please.
listener to get this. Cyclical means there have been cycles through history where we went from statism to free societies to statism to free societies, and we run that circle over and over. And Mark Maresca is saying now that we're about to reach a cycle eventually where we hit a free society again. But doggone it, Mark Pulse is saying, yeah, but after that, we might come out of that and have statism again. But I'm going to
And
rewind.
that's not to
Huh?
wet blanket it, I swear, Mark. I swear. Once again, it's not to say, it's almost like to say that at the point where we get this, that's when it's immediate that everyone focus on it and like make it part of the habit and the culture to continue the focus on it, if that makes sense.
Right,
Right.
right. So let me be crystal clear. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form because it's not cyclical. I I deny the circle as a metaphor for this.
And also cyclical creates like an inevitability, which that is what you're denying is you think you can continually stave this off.
Correct.
It does
Correct.
that make sense? Like, so when I say, if I may clarify, if when I say cyclical, that doesn't mean it's inevitable. It could be much more elliptical than
Right.
like round, or you know what I mean, or like this way. And even then, it could also be not happening or being extremely, molasses slow too.
Right.
But
Right.
cyclical in the way that that is generally how transitions happen, I guess, in a way, if, in a
And
mechanical sense.
correct. And we also would want listeners, I would not want listeners to take from this that there's any, and I think you just touched on it a second ago. There's no fixed pattern. There's no inevitability to this. That's why shapes are tricky to use a sine wave or a circle because those are fixed shapes. And then we'll think, ah, okay, history and society is going to follow some kind of shape. Even if it's a random shape, it's going to still follow the shape. And the um, that
Will,
puts inevitability into
culture
that.
takes all the
Right.
humanity out of it, I guess, in a way, because humans
Right.
do
It takes the
change, they evolve and change. Yeah.
exactly right. So to me, rather than use a shape as our way of using a visual metaphor, I would say think of it as a ruler. A ruler. Now, the ruler isn't the shape. The ruler's intent is to measure things. So we're going to apply a ruler to history. We will look at any point in it at the colonial days. We'll look at it at the Egyptian days. We'll look at it today. And we'll say, measure the level of the myth of authority. Measure the strength efficacy of the myth of authority in that time period and that place. So we'll take colonial America because it's one of the best examples of that. In colonial America, right after the Declaration of Independence, the 13 colonies were as close to a anarcho-capitalist type of enclave as you've ever had. They weren't. They were not, but they were close because they did not have a strong overreaching government over them. They had kicked out Britain, first of all they had really was this very loose confederation among them and these very loose local city or county type of
They all
councils or
had their
whatever
own
they had
dollars, they had their own
that have
currency,
their own
like states.
currency.
It was a very
Right.
different time. It was a very different. There wasn't like the Fed was, the Fed wasn't around. There was, there were a lot of things that were different about the
And
time.
especially in particular, as to the psychology of it, if you think about Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which sort of lit the fire on all that, and the Declaration of Independence itself, the very wording of those documents gives the flavor of skepticism to authority, right? They're mocking King George in the Declaration of Independence with a list of the things this tyrant did, and they're using words like that. It's infused with skepticism, which means the myth of authority is sort of suffering a little bit. It's buckling a little bit. It wasn't absent. People of the colonies still believed you needed a government. Okay, well, right there, you got a problem because the myth of authority is still in their heads. but it is highly weak compared to today. It's highly weak compared to communist North Korea.
I will
This is a
take
people.
that time all day right now.
I
I'll
hear
take
that.
that time all day, even without electricity, man. I'll do
Exactly.
it.
So if you think of the average farmer, the average merchant, or whoever they were back then, they all had a much more general sense of their own value, their own independence. And while they still had the myth of authority in their head, it wasn't as powerful. And notice how collectively that environment was not at all conducive to powerful government. People had this sense that they didn't want to put up with that. And the environment, meaning the political environment, reflected that. You had a very weak, a very ineffective government. And those 13 colonies, they had a loose confederation, but it was loose. So that is a reflection in the outward real world at that time and at that place of the level of the myth of authority. Our measuring stick sort of says low myth of authority. And what do you see on the outward world? Low level of government.
Right.
America of the
And I would add
1800s.
to that,
Uh,
those
mhm.
people that were running for elected office were directly held responsible. I mean, they were
They were their
always they
neighbors.
were of
Yes,
the people. They were literally of the people. Like
right.
let's use just a Mandami, whatever, Zoran, whatever, never worked a job. And he's a
Yeah,
mayor of New York
right,
City.
right, right, right.
Mm,
He's not of that.
that's kind of hard. It's kind of
Right,
hard to
right,
That's a hard pill to swallow. Even if it's white,
right.
that would be hard to
Well,
swallow.
it's not white, it's a black one. So, but as you can see, so in that example, and then you could look at, we'll just use North Korea today, the environment, the myth of authority environment. Let's take that measuring stick. Oh, look at that, very high myth of authority. They believe in leaders. They believe their leaders are divine. We just said they actually believe their leader doesn't have a butthole or whatever, that he created this or that, the sun. That's the myth. Well, the myth translates into the real world. What's their political environment look like? Highly authoritarian. The measuring stick works. And you can see it today. Measure any free territory, fairly free territory like Singapore. A little bit lower on that myth of authority measuring stick, less government intrusion. Still myth of authority, still a
But
government,
they have a
but
they have a
less.
pretty strict like order. Don't they have like a pretty orderly thing? Isn't that the
Their
king where the
order
king
large
happened?
correct. Their
So
order largely comes from their religious and cultural backgrounds.
right.
And so that's the influence there, which of course bleeds over into the politics too, but
Right.
still it's
That
not
I
the
mean
politics.
that is statism and it's always just a with a different cloak, And if
Correct.
let's say that religion predated statism. I mean, as the thing to follow, there it's another evolution in that way.
It is very
But
likely. So rather than seeing history cyclically, it's really just a little messier than that. You just sort of have to take your ruler or measuring stick of the myth of authority and measure it at
good
any
way to
given
talk
time
about
and
it that way.
place. And then you'll see where things are. So what does that tell us for the future? Well, that all depends on the status of the myth of authority at any given time or place. So my conclusion, which is, you know, the second part of the Myth of Authority series, lays out the reasoned, empirical, tangible trends that strongly suggest that the myth of authority is in the process of eroding. Granted, the very, very early stages of that right now, but a trend that's sustainable. And therefore, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, that myth of authority is going to decline further. It's not going to disappear in the next 10 years. I'm not saying it will, but if it declines, the state, as the effect of the myth of authority, will necessarily feel it in kind. And with time, the technology we're living in right now, which by the way is quite unique historically, we do not have any kind of um, counterpart to this in all of history. This is very unique with the internet. That is essentially the sustainable technological element in this that is going to take us across the finish line, assuming these trends continue. I'm not saying that I'm guaranteeing it. An asteroid could hit us, but assuming all other things are considered, that's the trend we're headed toward. So anyway, that's sort of the long and short of how the Myth of Authority series ended up being what it is.
I like that. So we've got a couple comments in here. It's interesting.
Let's do it.
Thank you for joining us, Evolutionary Capitalist. Let me see here. Here we go. I want to pull this one up if you may. Do you mind reading that one, Mark? And I'd love to get your thoughts on that one. Authority
Okay, I
comes from
hope it.
objective value and
Yeah.
expertise. Let's look. Can we go back to COVID? Can we use COVID as the the fallacy of
Let's.
authority, of appeal to authority?
Yes, but I want to speculate that the that evolutionary capitalism might have meant. This is where authority is a tricky one. So let's hit both of them.
Yeah,
I think he
I'll
may
keep that up
mean.
there. Sorry.
Thank you. Perfect. I think he may mean, and if I'm wrong, we'll jump to what you said, COVID, because it's a great example of the other side. If he means by authority, the authority of a doctor, in medicine, the authority of a lawyer in law, the authority of an accountant in accounting, the authority of a computer programmer, meaning they know their stuff. If you want to know something about that topic, you would go to them. If you need their expertise, you need to hire them. When I talk about the myth of authority, I do not mean those kinds of authority. I'm not anarcho-communist where I think
You're not
all
talking about your
hierarchies,
accountant on tax day because they know the tax code better than you,
they
right? You're
better know.
talking about this other way, this other authority of actually people
But
who
in
don't have expertise, I would argue.
particular, I would distinguish by authority that you consensually agree to and authority you don't consensually agree to, that you're coerced into following. So when you hire a lawyer, when you hire an accountant, you've chosen to employ their expertise. You defer to their authority in the context of the contract you make with them. When a
I
coach
think he
is
just
is
clarified. I think they just
uh
clarified as well. The
sure,
authority
it's
of a parent to override the free will of a child. Now that is a little That's the
okay.
overreach.
That goes into
The
another
government is
direction.
our child, not our parent. Thank you very much, or should be
That's right.
at best.
So just
Uh,
so
so I
so
would
jumping
yes, I
to
would argue that
yeah.
that's not. Anyway, good.
Correct, correct. So if we mean the authority that was perceived as expertise in the COVID times, yes, that is absolutely connected to the state because Fauci and all his, his minions were all pressing this narrative through the strength and power of the government that their expertise said that this COVID is a catastrophic threat to humanity. And so people did have a tendency to follow that authority because that myth of authority tells us you follow what the government says. You're supposed to do
I
that.
am science. I
I am
am
science.
science.
Exactly.
So no,
So
I
that
want
I
to once
do.
again, I want to give
Yeah.
Grace also evolution. I want to give Grace objective here. He said I ignored objective value part. So I think there are two parts to this. And to your point, Mark, you had bifurcated those. Authority
Yes.
like, hey, I'm going to a doctor to get rid of to get a surgery done. I'm going to a
Yes.
dentist to get a work on my teeth. I'm going to a podiatrist for my feet, these types of things, specifically those authorities. But you're talking about in this general authoritarian authority sense where rights and things are taken and things like that.
Right.
To
So,
that
so for
point.
your listener, for your viewer there, yes, he is absolutely right in the objective value sense, meaning that expert has value to you as an individual, and you are willing to trade your money for that person's expertise to help you in a specific context based on a specific contract. What's moral about that? You both entered into it consensually. You consented to the arrangement. You consent to defer to their authority and expertise. That is objective value, meaning it's objective to you. You find it valuable. That is completely valid and moral. And none of what I talk about applies there because I'm not making judgments on consensual relationships. That's up to the
Right.
individuals.
It's like an informed
Rather,
consent thing. I mean, for sure, 100%.
exactly, exactly. But if the expert is being forced upon us through the state and its apparatus, okay, we have a problem with that. Why? That's not consensual. We do not agree to that voluntarily. That's the clear, to me, a clear distinction between authority that you defer to in a moral, proper sense, and that which is objectionable.
I like it. I want to pull this last one up only because I think people conflate freedom and liberty. Like I fight for liberty. I think that's different than freedom. Now it includes the freedoms, but it's more like the liberty part is like the core rights that grant me my, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
I see them as differently. So I could argue, yes, I think freedom could be a myth or like a religion, but I think the fight for liberty is a different thing, and that's kind of where I lean. What are your thoughts on the liberty versus freedom in that respect, Mark?
People find me very annoying when I get questions like that because I can't answer it until I understand what exactly they mean by freedom. I would ask them
Yeah.
to define their terms. Now, that doesn't mean I want to go down the rabbit hole of what freedom is or what are flavors of freedom. We could do that, but we're going to run in circles because then we'll use other words that themselves can be misinterpreted. I want to just answer your question. The way I look at it is, in a sense, it doesn't matter if the source of what you consider valuable is morality, religion, your conscience, what your father taught you. That's all fine. Whatever you find as the best source of your value system, that's your right to to have those opinions. What really counts ultimately is what is going to reduce conflict between human beings. What's going to be most conducive to peace so that we're not fighting each other. And clearly and overwhelmingly, the answer to that is private property and non-aggression, meaning we own ourselves, meaning our bodies. We get to say what happens with our own bodies, and we get to say what happens with our property, our tangible things that we own. Nobody can violate that consent. People do violate it. That's what crime is. But we judge that as wrong. What's right is we own our body, we own our property, and the scope of our freedom, our liberty, our consent, whatever you want to call it, is the scope of our body and our property. I have full freedom over my body and my property, and I have zero freedom over yours and everyone else's. That's it. That that's the answer to the question.
I like that. So we will get back to some evolutionary capitalist stuff. There's some interesting stuff here in the chat, and I do appreciate the engagement for sure. I'd like to talk a little bit about this now with the myth of authority and everything.
Okay.
Did you get to finish your points about that, or after your epiphany, or did you want to close butt up any thoughts that we had missed? Because we had gotten a little sidetracked. But you know what? That's what this show's all about. It's about
It's okay.
it's literally about the exchange of ideas, and that's why I wanted to bring up something I wasn't sure what this person in the chat meant exactly, because it's important to get clarification.
No, that's good. And I do hope we circle back to some of those comments because your listeners are coming up with really good questions. But the one thing that you had emailed me about, or perhaps it was in the notes for the invite, was the example of slavery. Why can you
Yes.
uh, give the viewers what
Yes. So
basically your
I wanted to
point was?
actually it was something I wanted to push back on, but I wanted to give you a yes and kind of thing. So you talked about abolition having a 50-year movement and how they got it to go. I'd actually argue that Lincoln's push to keep the Union together is really what drove the victory in the hands of people who also wanted abolitionism as well, if that makes sense. So
It,
it wasn't really to push that, but it's almost like statism was used because people like many libertarians argue, like Thomas De Lorenzo, for example, writes many books about, he's with the Mises Institute, right? He's written many books about Abraham Lincoln. And he's not one of the worst presidents, not one of the best, suspending habeas corpus, all these types of things. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that as a contrast to what you talked about. And then if you could share about what you felt about the abolition, and just to clarify your thoughts on it. Because like I said, it's not that I disagree. It's more of just like, I'm trying to color in the lines, or shade it in a little bit, I guess.
right, right. So my perspective on that really does cover more or less the planet in the mid 1800s. It's not just the United States. The United States is a great example of it, but it is also a little bit of an aberration of an example because the United States fought a war that culminated more or less toward the end with that included the abolition, the formal legal abolition of slavery. That's
Right.
not at
You're
all
talking
how
about the global movement that was happening. Okay. And I didn't pick up on that. So if you could expound on that, I'd love to hear that, because that
so if
I
you
want to be
correct.
educated. So thank you.
If you zoom out, then you'll notice that other countries that ended slavery did it peacefully. They just ended it. Now, I'm sure they all did it in a different way. And I'm not saying zero countries had violent conflict, but you really don't hear too much about any other examples of it. The Civil War is the big event that was connected to slavery in that sort of political, uh, violent way. Brazil, other places, Britain, they ended it. Now, I'm not saying there might not have been protests or other violent activities, but really none of those would have been enough to have made it happen. So it's very easy in the United States to say it's the Civil War that freed slavery. There, in the United States, politics and abolition and states' rights were all intermingled as a very tight web of dynamics. So it's very hard to really kind of
It's
push out
much
one of
more
those
nuanced than
things.
people appreciate. Everyone
Exactly
keeps
right.
singing North anti-slavery,
Northeast.
South pro-slavery, while states in the
Correct.
North had slavery during the war. I mean, you're sitting here like scratching your head, going, "Come on,
There's
man,
a lot
just
going on.
just stop." Once again, it's kind of like Americanized. You know what I mean? Like, I give me the facts. To your point, like this nuance is so important to
And
have.
this is why for me it often helps to zoom out and try to see a bigger picture. And that's why I said globally. Now it's not that I'm an expert on the planet, but if we take that very big perspective of the historical view of slavery, it's obvious that for most of human history, at least recorded history, there was entrenched slavery of one kind or another. It's obvious that today there's virtually none. Okay, something big happened. And it all seemed to happen right around that mid early 1800s period. So obviously that was a transition away from a major entrenched institution. A transition happened, which that curve, that inflection point is minuscule compared to the rest of history. And now here it is, what is it, 150 years later, and we have, relative non, a world without slavery. And I do realize there is some slavery in the world, even
Yeah,
where it
but
exists
let's look
anymore.
zoom out. We have less. I mean, there's technically more slave. It's weird, but whatever. Also nuanced, right? Like the numbers are just weird. Also, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you
I
can't
mean,
really compare that. The eras,
exactly. In the West, at least if we say in the West, and certainly in,
right?
the
We would
Asian
recognize that
countries.
slavery is wrong. All of us would
Correct.
recognize if we knew
Exactly.
slavery was happening, we say
Ex-
that is wrong, and if
Correct.
we knew it was happening,
And you
I would
hit
say.
on it right there, the psychological aspect. Because why did slavery exist? Well, like the government existing, it's an effect. It's an effect of whatever the environment has an appetite for. Most of human history, the environment of humanity had an appetite, had permissibility, had a myth that humans can own each other. That was true. It manifested in the real world in the form of slavery. Today, there is no appetite for slavery. There is no meaningful appetite for one person being allowed to own another person. Oh, and look, the outward effect of that is no slavery. So you see how the psychological environment that humans exist in any given point is reflected or measured, and you can see how the outward effect is manifested. At the 1800s, that's when things were changing. The attitudes about slavery were changing. Slowly and systematically, it was bleeding out that this ain't so nice. This isn't really cool. Didn't happen all at once, but it was bleeding out there. So books were being written. It was appearing in articles. Religious groups were noticing that this isn't such a nice thing, this human slavery. And as that bled out, it got reflected in the actual environment, meaning little by little, counties, states, countries were saying, oh, okay, this, I don't like it anymore. Let's not have it. And they abolished it. They abolished it there and there. In the United States, because there happened to be however many states there were at the time, 18 or 20 or 30, I don't know what the number was. Each state had its own little sovereign government, and also there was the overriding United States. So that's why there ended up being a battle about it. But the relevant thing is that the mood or environment or culture was changing. And in the end, it culminated ultimately with um, abolition across the board. But there's another element in this which we sometimes forget, and which I actually didn't mention in my series: technology. The Industrial Revolution was really getting its legs, which means machinery, human efficiency was ramping up in a significant way. Slavery was proving to be a really, really poor way of getting labor done, of getting
Getting
productivity
productivity,
done.
because you need someone to work a machine or
It,
some kind of expertise and things like.
right. So
To
economically,
evolutionary's point, authority, expertise to like work the whatever equipment that you got in the industrialization.
exactly. So it didn't compete well against other now more highly or more technological type of ways to produce. So slavery was just losing ground on that ground alone. And I think it's quite debatable as to which of these two elements, the moral element of denouncing slavery on moral grounds versus the pure economic inefficiency of it,
Picking up.
which
Hmm.
had the greatest effect. I have no idea, but both were there, present, and I almost call it like a convergence of two really good things: the morality
Well, I
against
can tell
slavery
you,
and
regardless
technology.
of what it was used to tug at the heartstrings to keep that war machine funded. So it was definitely used, the slavery aspect, for
Yes,
the Philadelphians and the New Yorkers and the Baltimore and the
correct.
Bostonians, right? That were,
Right,
let's be
right.
on, like,
And and and
let's be
and
honest. Or
happily that culminated in abolition. Now it's even
yeah,
arguable that
absolutely,
had
which is
the
great. Yes, the end of
had,
slavery is a great thing. Everyone, just spoiler alert.
so we're
Just
saying,
to
yeah, yeah,
put
they're
that
going to be
out there.
shocked at that. But you know what's
Um,
interesting there is that technology and this sort of growing skepticism of slavery, this bucket of skepticism, which through all of history was empty. Nobody was skeptical about slavery. Nobody. And then 1800s come along, and these little thimblefuls of skepticism start to fill up this bucket. And there's this a tipping point is reached. But at the same time, the technology of the Industrial Revolution is also undermining slavery. The convergence of those two things had enough power to finally end slavery. And by the way, in a very short period of time, in 50 years, from 50 years, we had full on slavery, early 1800s. We mean the planet. 50, 60 years later, almost none. It's dramatic. That's because of the convergence of those two things. A happy convergence. It's not like they had to happen at the same time, but they did. Let me
it's like a
fast
perfect
forward to,
storm in a good way. In a good way, the perfect,
well, right.
the perfect
And the
day.
perfect storm in the good way today is this growing skepticism of the state. Not just, oh, I don't like my government or I don't like that government, but I don't like government. That's not filling up the bucket to any significant degree yet. But generalized skepticism, people seeing videos of what ICE agents are doing, people seeing whatever, like children in Gaza suffering. Those are all adding little thimblefuls of skepticism to this bucket of overall skepticism. But with that what happened along with that is the technological fact of the internet. The internet has decentralized the flow of information, so much so that government propaganda is no longer able to have the efficacy it had through all of history. That's over. And now they're still propagandizing, as I
But
said before.
wait, hold. I'm sorry to black pill. Sorry to darken the
Do
white
it.
pill.
Let's do it.
But the technology never could be used the way against you the way it is now. And with the powers that be being able to monitor you and be able to suppress you, your voice doesn't isn't the same voice when you could stand on a soapbox and they actually couldn't stop your voice. And it worked obviously well very locally, but things were a lot more local. They're a lot more global to your point now. And you do need to have reach and things. So you do need them to not be able to turn off that switch. Like there it is, the kill switch. Did you hear about this kill switch vote? Did you? Okay.
The kill switch
So
on your cell phone.
the new bill, yeah, no, The new bill. Thomas Massey posted it. Actually, you know what? Let me pull it up because I actually have it right here. Let me pull this up. Hold on.
Let's,
I'm sorry to cut you off here, Mark, but this is so
no, let's do it.
important
Let's
here.
do it.
I'm saving it for tomorrow too, but here is the, let me see which one. Vote in House to, okay, here it is. All right. Let me do that. I don't know. Can you read that at all?
I
So
can. I
let
can.
me read this. Let me read this for you guys. Hold on one second. Let me read this for you guys. Here we go. House rules are, this is from Thomas Massey. This is a vote on the bill, on passing a bill. House rules are complicated and not well understood, even by many of my colleagues. Every Republican who voted for the DHS bill, which was everyone but me, enabled gender affirming care earmarks and the automobile kill switch mandate to pass
Okay.
the House. Okay. So this is the first one. Let me remove that one. Hold on. I don't even know how to do that. Okay. Let me get rid of that one. So then he decided to put an actual bill up about the kill switch itself to remove the kill switch. Okay. So remember, the Republicans are in control, right, Mark? They're the
Yeah,
guys
they're in control.
holding everything back, right, Mark? Look what happens. 57 Republicans voted down the removal of the kill switch in cars. So that got moved on forward to the Senate.
Mhm.
Under Republican control, everybody.
Right. So
That's how
the
it works.
lesson here, the lesson, everybody, is that politics works.
There it
Politics
is.
works. It works
They are,
as
I
designed.
mean, come on. When when they both agree that kill switches should be in your car so they can turn it off at any time for any reason that they deem fit, then you know they're onto something, right? Then they're the good guys when they agree on that.
Right.
Like,
Right.
come
So
on.
this illustrates very much so, and thank you for bringing this up, what I said before. The black pills are out there. They're always out there, and they're not going to stop. Okay? So we can always find examples just like this, where government's going to use tools of technology, awful tools like this, to try to be more authoritarian. I never deny that. I acknowledge that's happening. I can't do anything about that. What I can do is try to zoom out and see the overall trends. Now, with this particular thing, I don't know what's going to become of that. It could end up
We
being
just
an
buy a
actual kill
1968
switch.
Chevy Camaro with with you don't need to worry about a kill switch.
Right,
You might
right,
worry about the gas, but okay.
right. And so the environment that the Senate and congressmen exist in today is an environment where they're comfortable putting forth bills like that, where they're comfortable voting for them, and clearly they're comfortable voting against the one that would have canceled that particular provision. They're comfortable doing that. Okay, so far so good for them. Maybe they'll pass it. Then they have to be in an environment where they actually implement that. That means getting that switch into every car. Now, presumably, they're not going to try to do every physical car because then you have to retrofit them to every car that exists. That might be hard. Maybe they're going to do that. But my guess is they'll say no for every new car that comes off the
I think
assembly
it's the
line.
new cars from going forward, right? That's what I was
Okay.
saying. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the environment that that will create, assuming all this even happens and it doesn't get struck down through some kind of court thing, which is also in the environment that they have to deal with, working against them, then that means that the manufacturers have to do this too. But the environment also includes out there very, very many, many, many very clever programmers and IT people who would just find it the most interesting challenge to figure out how to turn that thing off. Now, obviously, the rebuttal to what I just said
That's
is, oh, yeah,
you,
but
my friend, you computer science nerd.
I wish, I wish. But the rebuttal to that is commonly by the classic libertarian, oh yeah, well the government will then make that illegal, or they'll find a way that it'll communicate when the kill switch is off. Yeah, I know. That's why I don't like going down these rabbit holes because we get into all these tangents, and all it is an argument over what the government really will end up doing, or really might not end up doing, or really what in my mind I can imagine them doing. Well, my imagination is irrelevant here. I'm not, I don't get any joy out of pretending to imagine a fantasy of what's going to come. I like to stick with the real world, what's actually happening, and the trends. If this particular
But
black pill
I would
happens,
argue though,
Mhm.
when you make those predictions, it's to predict so that they come true or don't. Like, let's be honest, the people that were wrong at the beginning of COVID were certainly not wrong at the end of COVID. You know what I
Right.
mean? Just
Yeah.
like the people, once again, just using that as an example is at that point, right? We have to be careful on just the trends. It's like I actually made a prediction about the federal pole ice force existing when,
Right.
so if I may, just cutting in into this part. So
Mhm.
remember when they
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
all the stuff in San Francisco and all the bad DAs, they were letting all the people out like 30-time criminals. I go, they're letting, Chicago, Philadelphia, that's my hometown, all those areas.
Mhm.
And I said, they're letting that happen on purpose so they can justify the growth of a federal police force. Now,
Right.
I had said that months and months ago is a predictive thing. Now, I got bamboozled in my own head because I thought the Democrats would implement it, but I forgot. Order needs to be implemented by Republicans because they oppose doing that. It has to be them, just like the Patriot Act and all those types of things. Just like Obama had to bail out the banks because that was something that you would never let a Republican get away with ever. So they had to crisscross applesauce. You know what I mean? But it was, agreed upon terms, if that makes sense, right? So
Yes.
that's what
Yes.
I'm seeing with this newest thing is that. What are your thoughts on that?
This is where you are better at this than me, at looking at sort of the local and more immediate trends or facts, like this kill switch, or like you just said, San Francisco. And you're better at this. You'd probably be better at sports predictions, where you can say, okay, this will have a push or pull in this other respect, right? And your focus is so awesome because it has that more immediacy about it. And therefore, when weeks, months, whatever it is, pass, you can look at that and say, you see, I got it right. It was so obvious that it would end up that way, even if it wasn't obvious to everybody else at the time. And I want you to replicate that with what you just said about COVID, because I think I want to lead into that a little. So, talk about, if you don't mind, your gut predictions that you would have had at that very, very early stage when the crackdowns were really getting started.
With COVID.
Yes.
Okay, so if I may, it's crazy stories about COVID. So I was in Belize on March 9th, coming back from a trip that I had I that my boss like has a drawing or has like a competing competition every year, and he gets to take people on trips, and he's such a gracious guy. I just want to say he's really amazing guy. I don't use names because like I don't get my work whatever, but regardless, if it ever comes across, because you know who I am, you can look me up and see who it is. But my boss, awesome dude, love the guy, he's so awesome. So we're sitting there. I actually funny, it's March 9th, and they were just talking about possibly shutting down the airport, like in the countries, right? And I go to the bathroom at the Belize airport. Now, if you go to Belize, the mainland, I think it's the mainland one, where they all land, the jet lands. There's a bathroom there, and the toilet literally is Corona. It actually is a Corona toilet. I have a picture of me taking it going, the origins of the coronavirus.
Well,
No
that's
joke.
funny.
Like, that's how stupid and goofy I am. Anyway, so come back from that, go to Vegas the next week. They
Right.
shut down Vegas the day we're there. I was in Vegas during not during, but I was there the day of the Vegas shooting and the day they shut it down for COVID. Two of the strangest days in Vegas I've ever experienced. But that was crazy. So then everybody goes home. We're driving home. This is mid-March now. And we start listening to this thing. They had this 24-hour emergency. What is COVID? Dun, 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 ba, 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 ba. Fear, ka, 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 ka. And they had some guy with the fear book. Be careful, all that stuff, back and forth. Early days, it was just, we don't know what this is. No idea. Then Brett Weinstein gets on Joe Rogan in April. And he goes, Joe, there's something about a cleavage site in an email that was going around here. And I think that's what we should be looking at. And it's not of original origin from what I've been told. And then alarm bell just immediately went off. Just immediately. And it's like, okay, I'm diabetic now. So I'm 218 pounds at the time. I'm diabetic, or 208, maybe 210, something like that. I go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start losing a little more weight. I'm going to cut all my sugars down, and I'm going to get healthier. I'm going to open up a window. I'm just going to take vitamin D, vitamin C, like supplement. That's just kind of what I do anyway. So that's just that's what I always do. You know what I mean? It's just like natural things. If you vitamin C, you can get through oranges if you want them, or you could eat fruits and vegetables. Just do something better. Got my blood sugars way under control. Blah blah blah. And then everyone around me was getting, don't get your grandma thing. And I was challenged because, like, I went down the rabbit hole. Should I get it? I'm on the cusp of 50. Like, I was telling people, I was reasonable. I said, if you're 50 or older, I think that sounds reasonable. I guess the risk reward from what it sounded okay, but I didn't know. But I was under 50, so I was like, okay, I was able to escape my own thing, right? So, like, it was a bias, because I was not interested in taking it in any way. Only because I didn't know. Because I have no interest in being a guinea pig for someone else, to be completely honest. And
Right.
all the stuff about it, the wet farm and the bat market, and the lab leak came out early, and the database disappearing all of a sudden, and the Olympic Games, or the military Olympic Games, in October. Oh, that makes sense that it would have spread. That's how Italy got hit really hard. Something about their Italian military Olymp. Have you heard about that? I don't know if you're familiar with that whole
I
thing.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm skeptical by nature, but then the more they push, wear the mask, and I wore a mask everywhere to conform, just because I didn't want to hear it. I wore a mask everywhere. I'm not gonna lie, I did conform in that way, but I'm just like, this is ridiculous. I mean, I knew it wasn't effective in any way. So, but it was really Brett Weinstein just saying just the littlest thing about the emails and the cleavage site, and I just love the way he was remember when I don't know if you ever watched Brett Weinstein or know him, but he
I've seen
covered
a
his
few
face
times.
at one point, really taped it up. He said, if you're going to mask up, this is how you do it. And they, like, hold that against him, but he wasn't
Mm.
doing it like to tell people to do that. He was like showing this is kind of what would be required if you really, you know what I mean, needed
Yeah.
to really protect yourself in some way. So
Right. Right.
what were your thoughts on it? How did what what went through your mind
Yeah.
during COVID as a whole?
Well, if you mean by a libertarian perspective, well, in terms of personally, yeah, I did not trust how though they were developing that vaccine. It seemed too fast. It seemed too new. I happen to be a person who doesn't get too experimental with things. I really am, let's say, conservative in my life that way. I really want tried and true things. That's what I'm comfortable doing. So just on the face of it, I would not have tried it anyway because of minor heart conditions. I was not comfortable with something that could mess with my DNA like that. So I was not going to take it, and I didn't. I never did. And thankfully, I guess because of my libertarian slash anarchist background, I was highly skeptical of the whole thing from the beginning. I did not like the crackdown, and that really is what more um, resonated with me, the fact that this is what's happening now, and this is a monster black pill, because this was true authoritarianism being tested, and it was working. The world, the planet went along with it. Um, and so I got to writing, and one of my significant essays on my Substack is, in fact, written just months into COVID, I think. And it's basically the psychology of the um, COVID overreacher. I don't remember what I called it now. And I was predicting there that this was going to be a continual kind of um, effort at control, but it all had to do with the psychology of the belief in authority. So once again, I was using this measuring stick. The environment at the time, the cultural environment, was it had an appetite for that kind of control. We were shocked to learn that the majority of people were all too ready to lock themselves down, stop sending their kids to schools, to mask up, to be distant, to take a vaccine. They were ready for it, and the government was all too happy to impose controls. In the essay, I predicted that so long as that myth exists, you're going to have this environment, but it's not really sustainable because it's a practical matter. People do want life to go on. They don't want to live like that. They may have the appetite for it now, but it won't last. And sure enough, within 2 years, as we all know, COVID fizzled. It ended. I don't know if you remember, but I don't remember the fanfares and the parades and the fireworks that they sent up. They didn't declare a national holiday for the end of
They did.
COVID.
It was the Joe Rogan, Dave Chappelle, Tom Segura, July 9th, when they opened up the MGM Grand. I paid a lot of money per ticket, but it was totally worth it to watch that with Darnell Rawlings. Anyway, so
Well,
that was when when Vegas officially opened, was I think it was July 9th of 2022 or 2021. I think it was something like that. I forget
that's
what.
the skeptics celebrating that it's over. But I was really more pointing to the state did not
Yeah.
declare the victory. Where are the
No.
fireworks that
Right.
they take credit for it? I thought this
Right.
was a catastrophic threat to humanity because that's how they sold it. Well, if they
Well, it's because it's
conquered
still
a
ongoing. That's the thing, is they can keep fomenting it and keep coming up. So the fight is never over, just like the war on drugs and the war on terror and the war on this and the war on reading and the war on, you know.
I think if that particular perspective had legs, we would have the mandates right now. We would
Yeah,
have
that's true.
distancing
That's a good point.
right now. The
Yeah.
environment no longer had an appetite for that.
No, definitely
The
we're done with it.
environment is not something anyone's
Fatigue.
controlling. Correct.
But see, the problem was it was fatigue, not defiance. And that's actually the problem, is you basically just beat them to submission until they're like, we're kind of done with this. But you have beaten them down for this whole stretch of time while you and I are sitting there swimming against the current going, no, 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 do not let them beat you down during this.
Mark, that's the white pill. Why? Because all it took was fatigue. It didn't need defiance. We, as the libertarians, love to think we're the heroes in the story, and it's our Star Wars rebellion that's going to defeat the Empire. Nope. The libertarians and the messaging have almost zero relevance in this. It's merely the status of the myth of authority and how it plays out in generalized skepticism. It's not filling that bucket of skepticism with a big old cup of anarcho capitalism because there just aren't enough of us and there never will be. It's filling that bucket with tiny little thimblefuls of modest skepticism by a population of 300 million people. 300 million people never, ever, ever becoming ANCAP. Not 10% of them ever becoming ANCAP. Don't matter. What matters is a little tiny thimbleful of skepticism. Every single person seeing another video of a person being abused by an ICE agent, seeing someone in Gaza, making them slightly think that the state, oh, I don't like that. That's a thimbleful of skepticism. Well, that bucket
You
among a
obviously haven't
planet of
looked at my
people,
Facebook feed, sir. You have not looked at my Facebook. I'm literally getting lambasted by these conservative MAGA Republicans
right, right,
defend not shouldn't have been there. Literally, stay at home, save a life, stay at home, and has a
right.
picture of Preddy on there. And I'm like, okay. So once again, let me take just a very objective step back.
Sure.
Did you put that up for Ashley Babbitt when she was shot by overreach of the state? And I'm just
Right,
calling the overreach of the state. I'm not calling
right,
what Preddy or Babbitt did right or wrong or anything. I'm putting zero judgment, but the state did. There were two unalived people after
yep,
those two incidents,
right.
which was created by the overreach of the state. We can include Waco
Correct.
and Ruby Ridge and Breonna Taylor, and we can talk about Dexter Taylor, who's in jail for assembling guns legally, for example. So then you hear these people defend it, and it's like they're different things because it happens to be Trump is trumpeting,
Exactly
for
right.
lack of a better term. And
That's the myth of
we
authority
get to
at
this
work.
tribalism thing, right?
Yes,
And I'm
exactly.
wondering if
Right.
it's like your myth of authority is spot on, in my opinion, 100%. But I think it's a yes and. They also create this team thing, right? That this tribalism for like that makes it a sport that you have to side with that team. That was an interception, or that no, he caught that ball. No, he was inbounds, or no, he's totally out of
Right.
bounds. He didn't catch it. That exactly what I'm talking about, yelling at the
Yep.
TV screen for your team, and the emotion get involved as well. And it's like that's what makes it all disgusting. And I'll be honest, if I had the ring of power, I'd use it on everyone. So just from that philosophy, because I know that I would, no one should have it because
Right.
they would use it
Right.
because I know I would if I had it. It's just
Right.
like, duh. It's like almost so simple. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll leave it
Yeah.
there before we play this video. I'll let you please close your thoughts on that. I just want to jump in, like, just weird thoughts as they come in as we're
Yeah,
talking.
and once again, just to give you a kind of a guideline on how I look at those things, you've got these MAGA right-wing Republicans supporting this kind of terror that's been happening recently with these people being unalived. When I look at that, I say, they thought that 6 months ago. They were like that 6 months ago. They were people who are so overcome by the myth of authority that they express themselves this way. Nothing's changed about that. They were that way 10 years ago, last year, today. So I'm not looking at some kind of scale that's changing. That's a fixed amount, so to speak. And they will likely be that way 2 weeks and 2 years from now and 20 years from now. They're irrelevant if they're not changing the equation. What's important is what's changing, the trends. And the trend is that general skepticism is increasing. I can't point to one particular person. I can point to a trend. And so that particular level, it's just there. It's a fixed level. But the trend of skepticism over the myth of authority, that's what's eroding, and that's what counts in the long run. Anyway, that's my kind of consolidated thoughts about that.
I love that, the trend of that. And the point is, when I respond to these people, I don't do it for them. I do it
Right.
for the people who happen to come across the conversation,
Yes.
because I'm not there to convince these people are big dug in, but I also use it to kind of hone my debate skills in a way. So I actually
Mhm.
use it to go, oh, what angle can I use that they can counter? And like, if I just get, vitriol back, I know they have nothing to counter with, things like that. So it's an interesting time to do that. It's fun to do it that way too.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Absolutely.
so you had this part. I think it was part two. I think it's almost right about 12 minutes in. Might have been just before 12 minutes in of your 23 part series. I think I got to part six, or into part six today. And it's great. It's great listening to this. And it sparks so many ideas because it is like it's yes hands everywhere. Cause like
Yep.
I think because everybody's experience, you're right, you're dead on the core of it. And it's almost like so many people could color in additional things to make it not just, it already is a thing. The mass is there. It just needs to radiate. You know what I mean? Like just to be out. And I think so many people could, if they listen to that, they could provide so many added pieces to that you have. So you talked about this thing about someone coming in your house and you having a weapon and you shooting them and killing them and defending yourself. Anyone would call that self-defense. But then you said something about what if they were in another country, or just, and they were in a military uniform or something, had a vest. Could you expound a little bit? Could you recall that story a little bit and share that whole thing? Because that's going to lead into these epiphany that I had today of like, you did predict, sir. Because how long ago did you start this myth of authority?
Year and a half, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. So you
The series.
spoke of a hypothetical thing that, I mean, I would almost argue literally had just happened. So could you share a little bit about that
Sure.
analogy? Because
Sure.
I love your analogies. You have such a great way with analogies, and that's something I like to do as well, is trying to find real world examples of how we can picture like the sand in the engine kind of thing and all that. So
Right.
please,
Right.
I'll let you go. I just, like I said, I just
Uh,
want to let people know how brilliant this is, because it's a must watch or must listen for sure.
so that particular episode was largely about how the myth of authority infects our own brain and how it steers our thinking unconsciously. because it just happens to be an unquestioned level of assumptions inside of us. One of those being how we are naturally taught to defer to authority figures, in particular law enforcers. Okay, now put that aside for a second, and then I use the simple, unrelated example of someone busting into your house. Someone busts into your house, it's dark, you have no idea who it is or what it is. Most people would acknowledge that if you felt threatened in that case, you would have every right to defend yourself. This is your home, and you did not consent to what just happened, and everything about it looks very violent to you. Especially if you have children, someone you love, you want to stop this threat. So no one would, most people would not dispute that you have a right to do something about that. Okay, we're done with that particular example. Now, the next example is a a a, um, a uniformed military person is in some Middle Eastern country going door to door looking for a bad guy in private homes, busting down the doors and shooting people, perhaps innocent people, perhaps people who are threats based on the threat assessment of the people they're obeying because they're not making that judgment. They are obeying the authorities that they are deferring to, but nonetheless killing people as ordered. Again, I said sometimes innocent. How do we judge that? Quite differently. In that case, when I say we, I mean the typical statist myth of authority believer will say, well, that's justified because that's an American soldier doing that. And the people
We can use the
busting in,
Venezuelan boats as an example.
you can use the
No
Venezuelan
due
bolts. That's
process on a
perfect.
single one of them.
Right.
Double tap on one, and then the two that survived, they actually just sent back to the country. They didn't even charge them with drug
Yeah,
charge.
yeah, yeah. Right.
Yeah,
They were supposed to be deadly threats to the United
interesting.
States.
Yeah.
So there it is. So because they happen to have a uniform that you approve of, that's in your myth of authority permissible scope, well, then he's the good guy. The people he busted in on and who died or were harmed as a result, even if it were children, well, it's like, well, we don't have to think about that. We literally don't think about that. The myth of authority blocks that from our moral intuitions. And it says, no, what he did was right. And too bad for anyone that got hurt because they were either bad guys or they allowed the bad guys or they were hiding the bad guys. We justify it in our head. So the myth of authority manages to steer our thinking in two different situations that really effectively are not different because that person, that homeowner in the Middle East whose home got busted into, they had every right to defend themselves with deadly force if necessary, regardless of the uniform being worn by the person who busted in. That's my illustration of how the myth of authority affects us. Now, I think you wanted to
And we'd
relate that to
argue,
something else. Yes.
that right is many say from God, and that is very welcome to say. I just say it's given at birth. It's granted at birth, regardless of how it's granted. It's the right to
Yeah, I'm
defend.
glad you said that. Regardless of how you source that morality, you're inconsistent in applying it. You're saying, but that morality, what God wants or whatever, is okay here, but it's not okay there. In other words, the myth of authority circumvents your God. The myth of authority tells God what to do, right? The myth of
Well, it
authority
shows
says
all the
that,
Christians supporting Gaza. Let's be honest. I mean, if if you're a true devout Christian, literally this is where the
right?
cognitive dissonance hasn't happened yet, Mark. It's literally on my Facebook. This one person's going, "Do you not care about the immigrants who raped children and murdered children?" And I'm like, "Do you not care about the Gazans that were all the women and children, the tens of thousands? Are you kidding? Like, d- please stop with the for the children, for your protect. Don't stop that. Stop at that.
Right.
There's no that morality does not work when our side are just as culpable or guilty of that. It's just one of these things we got to work on circumventing these feels. To your point.
If you ask any neighbor, anyone, any random person, say, hey, neighbor, say your brother in law was murdered. They'd say, that's awful. And then you say, well, wait a minute now. Suppose it's not your brother-in-law. So let's say it's people who live 2 doors down the street. Suppose they're murdered. And you'd say, no, that's wrong too. Okay, well, wait a minute. Hold on. Suppose 2 blocks away, some innocent guy was murdered. How about that? They would wonder why you're doing that. They would wonder why you keep making more examples of something that is clearly heinous and wrong. They would wonder why you would expect them to be inconsistent, but they are going to be inconsistent until you bring statism into it. Until you say, wait a minute, that guy in Gaza busted into a home and killed a family. And now your morality says, well, that was okay because it was a good guy. So what the myth of authority does to us is make us inconsistent within our own moral framework. That's the damage it does.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And like I said, with this back and forth with people, I gave all these examples like Waco, Breonna Taylor, all these other people, and they come back and they respond. So I'm like, I didn't support that statism. And I go, oh, you just support this statism, right? Like to your point is like, it's not, I don't support no kings. I just don't support this king. I want my king to rule. And we haven't gotten to accountability and responsibility. And I think that's the core part of the humanity that they will always get you with. And I'd love to talk about that in the future. But because we're talking about this military thing, let's equate this to these incidents that we've recently had, these last two, where it's like, okay, you have some stuff happen. I'm gonna play. You shared a clip with me. I like to play. Would you like me to play it? And I love to get your comments on it because you shared it with me. I had to clip it right before the show just because it's such a great one.
Go for it. Yes.
All right, you ready to go? All right, here we go.
Let's do it.
You raise your voice, I raise your voice.
If I raise my voice, you'll erase my...
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Are you serious? You said if I raise my voice, you'll erase my voice?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just so your listeners, just in case, because it wasn't necessarily clear what he said at first. That's an ICE agent, I assume. Yeah, it probably
It
is.
looked like.
Says to the protester, let's call him a protester, who's holding the camera, who may have said things prior to that might have been belligerent or confrontational, whatever it is, to this officer or to whoever this person was. I'm going to call him a thug. The thug says, if you raise your voice, I will erase your voice. The person filming said, wait a minute, did I hear you right? Did you say if I raise my voice, you will erase my voice? And the thug nodded and confirmed, that's what I said. And that seems to be where it ended. So I'm assuming the person holding the cell phone did not, in fact, raise his voice to test whether the thug would erase his voice. And we know what he meant by erase his voice. We don't have to spell out exactly what he meant. It's clear what he meant. I first wanted to
there
get
are times
your
where you
thoughts
live
on
to
that.
fight another day, and there are times where you don't. And like in the light of what the recent happens and the tensions that are going on right now, probably one to kind of probably shy away from right now, just because I don't think anyone's thinking clearly 100% right now, regardless of what they think on either side. It's a
Sure,
little
there's
fuzzy.
definitely an argument that the person holding the camera even shouldn't have been engaging that way. Okay, because especially what happened recently, you saw people doing more or less innocent things, or what certainly appear to be non-aggressive things, being offed anyway.
Did you
Right?
hear that's
And
what they were
so,
saying? You can't carry a camera around. Did you hear Kash Patel say you cannot carry a firearm to a peaceful protest? It is not your right. You don't have the director of the FBI out of his face and crooked eyes said you do not have the right to carry a loaded weapon to a peaceful protest. That is wholly un-American. I don't know how more un-American that can be. And this is the director. This, by the way, this is the guy who at Freedom Fest 2024 bamboozled everyone by talking about going after Epstein and the deep state and whatever, and they got him. And is now defending and being the cuck for them. It's like, come on.
right.
So
if there's
anyway,
if there's one lesson that I would want to continually hammer home is to take the examples and then zoom out and see it in the perspective of the trends. So what just happened here in the last couple of weeks? We saw uh, what I consider innocent people who were not defying these quote unquote law enforcement, without a quote, thugs, not defying them, doing more or less peaceful thing, helping others up after they got knocked down, taking self videos and so on, even just talking as this latest one, being offed, being ended. We're seeing these things happening. Okay. And now zoom the way out, zoom way out. 9/11, another, highly publicized public type of news item where crackdowns and authoritarianism followed all that for 20 years. We were in Afghanistan, we were in Iraq, TSA, right? Banking regulations, all of that came out of 9/11. 20 years of authoritarianism. COVID, 2 years of authoritarianism, right? This ICE, this latest adventure by the government to try to crack down, started, when would you say, 4 months ago, 6, 3,
yeah.
somewhere in there,
I mean, the real escalation, maybe just a month or two, really,
a
if you
month or
really look at
two.
the recent escalations.
So not 20 years like
You're
9/11,
saying it's all
not
contracting.
the time frames
The
are
time.
in each event are being smashed down to a very shorter and shorter time frame where what happens, where the skepticism about them starts to grow. 9/11, you're going to tell me there was any skepticism about the terror wars for the first 10 or 15 years? You were admonished in
They found a
society if you
passport in the rubble, for Christ's sake. I mean, how could you not think
correct,
that it was
right,
the guy?
right. COVID, oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
everybody was on top of that. Everyone's against you if you were skeptical of it for about 2 years. And then it fizzled and it's gone now. There's high levels of skepticism toward COVID now. Took 2 years. This ICE adventure, as bad as things are for the last couple of months, even weeks, already across social media, across the world, skepticism is growing very fast. So I'm not saying that these terrible things are not terrible things. What I'm saying is they are being publicized and judged as bad by a higher and higher number of people very, very quickly, to the point where, let me draw your attention, when I believe it was the ICE leadership, I believe it was them, was justifying the recent ending of people's lives, right? They were justifying it. And the MAGA group, they're all on top of that. But on this, I think it's this most recent one, the White House gave a press conference, and this time, not quite as bombastic to justify what had happened. This time, the spokesperson, I don't remember her name, said, the president is looking at the videos now. They're still holding their judgment off. So they're not piling on to the, pro ICE
You're talking about
position.
Preddy?
Yes.
Did you see what Cash and Christy Nome said, and Scott, and not
Yes.
Scott Besson? Yeah, Scott Besson. I mean,
That's
those guys.
That's my point.
Right, and the point is, hello, Scott, get it right. It's not a cartridge. A cartridge. It's a magazine. Dude, a cartridge. Oh, geez. Don't
I know,
they like?
you
Get
should know
if you're gonna shit on 2A, like get the terminology right. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, it's just one of those things I have an issue with. It's almost like grammar. You know what I
I
mean?
had some of
Get
the
it right.
personnel a little wrong. I think you're right, and that's who I was struggling. It was Christy Nome and I guess Patel. The point
Yeah.
is that
And
they
were
are not
brandishing a weapon. Brandishing is the
Right.
term. I mean, come on, actively engaging office. Just the language, the rhetoric was
right.
very
But
dangerous.
in the previous examples, Renee,
Trump
Good,
Trump
I
had
think
said it right
was,
away. He didn't. He didn't wait. Is what you're
they
saying.
were all on top of it, right? This time you see that very slight, and I acknowledge it's a baby crack in the ice.
You're right. It's a good
But the
point.
White House wasn't as enthusiastic about this one. Okay, there's your crack in the ice. By the way, that's not the only trend that we could see as a positive sign for, hopefully this thing fizzling out, this ICE business. It's the fact that local law enforcement, police, sheriffs, you don't see them out there, at least I haven't seen them out there, defending or protecting the ICE thugs. You're not seeing that. Sometimes there will be a presence, but if you watch those videos and watch the faces on those local
Yeah.
cops, local sheriffs, they don't want to be there.
Yeah, they don't like
Or
that jurisdiction step over. Like we see, I mean, that's not that's a trope in the movies. Like when the feds come in and step on the local toes, nobody likes that. First of all, secondly, ICE doesn't do law enforcement. They can
that's right.
only do immigrate. Like you can talk about, oh well, if crimes get committed during the no, but they are only immigrate. They can't look for crime. It's like, oh, it's like, ugh,
And this
just the
is
way they're
why
using it.
And this is why when mostly it's the libertarians who come in here and start posting that this is the beginning of an authoritarian takeover, crackdown, and so on. Okay, you do this, libertarians, every single time there's some kind of major crackdown by the government. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't like those crackdowns. And I also know that after the crackdowns are over, there's always some kind of residual laws or regulations. The TSA is a perfect example that still haunt us. But that's not what the libertarians and others were predicting. They were predicting a 1984 police state. Let's be honest. That's what most of them say is going to happen, and they're using this ICE example as another example of that. But they're failing to, well, I don't know why they do that every time because they are wrong every single time. They're not seeing the nuanced dynamic of the environment that shifts along with these cases. So take that example we just saw with that thug in the car saying, if you raise your voice, I'll erase your voice. He was operating in a context of an environment. What environment? An environment where he is comfortable saying that on camera. So obviously, his bosses, right up to the President of the United States, their belligerent attitude makes him confident that he can say that to a person who's filming him saying that. If you raise your voice, I will erase your voice. Now, if he's comfortable doing that, saying that, it's possible he's comfortable doing it. But we don't know that because it all depends on how the environment around him, what sense he has. What is that environment? Well, it's a million things. It's people who are bringing leaf blowers to the thugs who are spraying pepper spray at them and shooting it back at them. It's people who are armed but haven't used those arms yet. What about the staff meeting that guy attends? Staff meetings, ICE staff meetings. I know it's not, exciting. It's a little boring to talk about that, but they have staff meetings. And in those staff meetings, you're telling me 0 of those ICE agents are asking their bosses, what happens if they start shooting at us? What do we do? Because I have one gun and I have pepper spray, but what if the crowd starts shooting at us, boss?
And
I'm
by the way,
imagining those
none
questions are
of that
coming
has
up.
even happened, is even close to happen. None of it. If any of it started, it's been instigated and pushed by the interference of the group itself coming in.
Exactly right. Exactly. It hasn't happened because the environment is not ready for it. We certainly hope the environment
And I
never
hope
gets
we
to the
don't
point
get it.
where
Right.
people are pushed that way.
Yeah, and to the point of the cyclical thing, I know we've only got about 15. Look out, it's like time warp,
It's
man.
cool.
Hour 45.
It's
Thank
so
you
fun.
again. First, Mark, thank you
Oh,
again
no
for
way.
joining.
Yeah,
We'll get your all your stuff before we call it a day. But and I'm
that's
just
fine.
grateful
Sure.
for the time. And just like I said, the exchange of ideas, like you painted some different shades of things that I haven't even considered from different angles, and I really appreciate that.
Problem.
And once again, I think people go to 1984 as like Brave New World is like, because that ultimately is where it can get. So like by saying it'll be there, that's the scare to keep you pushing. You know, it's almost like, what's the purpose? To not be that, almost like. So I agree with you that it almost is a cry wolf situation, because I think the normie, right, like, oh, everything's a conspiracy. Well, we're starting to find out that not many have been debunked. Many have been bunked, as a matter of fact.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, but
Yes,
I
and
don't know if you have
I
any
wouldn't
thoughts on that.
wouldn't want to paint a broad picture of all libertarians, because I've made a painfully clear, I hope, that libertarian scholarship and reasoned essays and all that, those are critical to
Brilliant.
ultimately a free society, because they lay the foundation, the principled and moral and economic legal foundations of free societies. I applaud people who engage in that. And those who do say, hey, this is overreach, this is a bad thing, advertise that as much as you can, because that only increases that bucket of skepticism. So I don't fault them for pointing it out. My criticism really is more like you said. If you say this is going to lead to 1984, you're going to sound like a boy who cries wolf, because every time it happens, the environment evolves to the point where the bullies eventually have to back off in some way. And that's exactly what happened with COVID. That's exactly what happens with all these major crises, is that eventually they have to back off because the environment doesn't have the appetite for it either. I know that's in a way boring and psychological, but that's in fact what happens. That doesn't mean don't be afraid of this, don't object or even protest against ICE. All that's fine, but just understand that that's adding to the bucket of skepticism so that they back off, not that they're going to be successful, because it takes a lot to be 1984, and that is after all fictional. So
Yeah.
that's my point.
Yeah. And to the point is, I'm not 100% certain even the signups of ICE agents or whatever. But like I said, I had talked about all these DAs letting all these people go. I'm like, the crime's going to get out of the point where they go, we know we don't want to do this, but we have to have a federal police force. So this is what I think is going to happen. I'm going to say that ICE will transition to this federalish kind of thing, where they'll be like, no, you're right. We don't give them 47 training. We give them 470 days of training, or 4,700 days of training, whatever. You know, they come up with this stupid bullshit that they're going to, whatever, train them like cops, but have them federal, almost like the National Guard substitute in this weird twisted way, implemented by the Republicans, because they're the only ones who could. They're the ones who could implement the Patriot Act. Now, this is my other side. I see they know that they're not getting these people out the way they need to, and the path to citizenship will be military draft of these illegal immigrants. Path to citizenship will be signing up for the military, and the military will military will stay on the ground here, while the American military gets sent over wars with the 1.5 trillion, and they're the ones who die. And because the new Americans have no connection to this country, they're the ones who will police this country here, while our American boys and girls die overseas and elsewhere. And I see this in a pattern, because I see it, and it's like oddly clear to the point where I'm like, this is happening. Chuck Schumer said it passingly because he had to normalize this. It's going to be military service will be a path to citizenship. But no offense to people who are displaced from their countries and brought here stupidly by our country on purpose for all of this to happen anyway. Let's not kid ourselves. It's all intentional, because it's all connected in some weird way. This is what it is. I mean, I feel bad for these people, but that's what they're going to do. They're not Americans here. They're displaced refugees from other countries. And I am a first generation American. My parents came here from Germany, but they gave us American names. They assimilated. They spoke English. You know what I mean? They only spoke like they assimilated. They didn't, there was a German town and a German club, but it was still Americans. You know what I mean? If the ideal, the West in that way. So this isn't anti-immigrant. This is The people that we're talking about are refugees displaced by our wars overseas and our conflicts overseas.
It's true.
More.
There's a lot of that.
Those are the
Absolutely.
problem immigrants that we're talking about here. Those don't hold
Well,
and imagine those people in that number, 500,000 of them even getting the pathway to citizenship through military service, and now they're serving. Well, who are they going to listen to? Are they going to listen to the American citizen, or are they going to listen to the government that's going to give them citizenship? I mean, it's like I know who I'd listen to. Unfortunately, if I were trying to become an American, you know what I mean? You're incentivized, right? So this is unfortunately like that's now that is crazy town. I know that that's crazy town. So Mark, talk me off that ledge while we got 10 minutes before we go.
Well, no matter what timeline we'd like to predict, because you could be right in some ways, wrong in others, you could be 100% right. We can't know how it'll play out. But whatever timelines we're predicting, they will occur within the context of whatever environment at that time exists. So, for example, let's say you end up being right that they incentivize people who are not documented to be here legally to do military service. And I believe you said that group of people would be domestic police, but overseas they would send the traditional soldiers. Well, one dynamic that will create will be resentment by the families and possibly the traditional American soldiers as to why do I have to go across over the seas and risk my life? And that group gets favored treatment of being comfy cozy within the United States. See, so
Right, but
and
that's
I'm
the
not
point
saying
though. The people in the United States are not connected to the Americans, so they're fine pointing the guns at these other strangers where Americans would not do that. I don't think the traditional American soldier would turn a gun on an American citizen on American soil just to do it, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like playing that psychological side of it.
that's debatable. I think if ordered, many of them would, but if
Yeah,
ordered, many
many,
of them wouldn't.
many would
Um,
100%. I don't
we agree.
disagree with that. But it is much more of a connection to your brethren, right? Like once again, it's almost like another step removed from the connection to the person that you're forcing.
Now, what I like is that you made specific predictions like that, and the details and nuances are obviously debatable. But what I want to do then, since you did, I want to make a prediction about how things will look. I'm going to pull 6 months out of my butt and just say 6 months from now. I say this whole ICE thing is going to fizzle.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm so glad that sounds controversial right now, because if I were to say tomorrow it's going to fizzle, obviously that would be controversial. I'm saying 6 months. It's going to fizzle the way COVID fizzled. How? They just will stop talking about it because it will get so nasty. Now, I do believe it's probably going to escalate a little bit more because it's gotten bad in the last week or two. And I think, like that last video we just showed, they're just as cocky. So I think that we're going to see a couple of more bad things happen. But as those things happen, I think those are going to put the impetus on anti-ICE sentiment even more and more, to the point where 6 months from now, they will prefer not to be talking about this topic. They will withdraw that particular form of immigration enforcement. They may replace it with something else, possibly what you mentioned, possibly something else, possibly both. I have no idea.
Remember,
But I'm
it's funded $100 billion through 2029. And even if it changes the name or something, it has to do with building jails and prisons and institutions. So it's kind of like when the ATF or when alcohol, whatever, after prohibition switched to reefer, man, they had to find a new enemy. This is where I think that transition is going to happen. To your point, I see part of that, like a little bit of both. Yeah.
Because
But
I make that prediction, not because I'm just kind of pulling it out, but because I see it as a trend. I see the trend today of coverage of this and sentiment about it moving in the direction toward more skepticism about ICE. That doesn't mean the MAGAs have disappeared. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you group the MAGAs here and the anti-ICE here, I think we're seeing a slight but noticeable flow from the one group to the other. We're not seeing a whole lot of people who are anti-ICE now being persuaded to go full MAGA. I don't really think that's realistic. The trend that's realistic is the other way. I seem to see the signs that that will continue, and it will continue to the point where, like COVID, they would prefer to just forget this all happened. They will redirect resources exactly the way you said, in some way I don't want to predict. And then hopefully, if you and I or we decide to talk about this 6 months from now, we can replay some of this and see which one of us gets the prize. So, what do you think?
Well, I have won the prize just for having your time gifted, sir. I'm really grateful. So
As
could
do
you
I,
share
definitely.
all your stuff? Share all your stuff. We got a few minutes now. Cosmic Blackie, this is a great question, Cosmic Blackie. Now, I must say, please join us tomorrow. And Mark, you might want to check in live tomorrow. We have Mike.
Okay.
We have Dr. Rechtenwald on tomorrow.
You got him. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, if I can
Good
connect you,
guess.
he's great. He's an amazing guy. I've spoken with him many times. I spoke with my first time was December 2023. But
Yeah, you told me.
basically, American soldiers going overseas to fighting American wars, just have people displaced by the war get citizenship to the U.S. In a broad picture, I know that sounds very simplistic. Yes, but it's like, yeah, a little bit. So just very quickly, we bomb displaced people. For example, the Venezuelans that are here are signed by Bob Menendez, the gold bar in his pocket guy. He's co-signed it with Marco Rubio for 500,000 Venezuelans to be here. And now they're the enemy, right? So they bring them over. Why did they do that? To displace the Venezuelan economy. That was the whole point, to displace them and to disrupt them and to have destabilization. What do? We bomb Middle East. They go north to Europe. That's what the European problem's coming from. So yes, we displace these people and take them in as refugees, but they don't come here with the American spirit to come here like people came here to do, if that makes sense. There was a thing, and I will accept anyone who wants to come here, not someone who ain't got nothing better to do. And I guess they'll give us stuff while we're here. I don't need those people. No offense. That's not the people I'm looking for, if that makes any sense to you.
It does. It does. It does.
Close it off, sir. Tell us all your stuff. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Come join us tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern. My Dr. Reckenwald's going to join us with Jake at Whiskey Smile.
Nice. You can go right to my YouTube channel, which is at the White Pillbox. That's all one word, at the White Pillbox, and you will see all my content right there. There's a playlist for those who are interested. That is specifically the series that Mark was referring to. It's the Myth of Authority series. It's a 23-part audio podcast series. It's a lot to consume, I suppose, because it's 23 parts, but each one is only about 25 minutes, 30 minutes each. You could speed through them if you want. If you're already a libertarian or anarchist and you want kind of a quick bullet summary of the whole thing, go to part 21, because part 21 was the series recap. And in 30 minutes, you'll get the whole gist of the whole thing. You won't get all the foundational details, but you could always refer to those through the show notes. That's how you reach me.
All right. Mark, thank you again. We're going to cut this. This has been another Knocked Conscious. Join us tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern live. We've got Dr. Reckenwald on If by Whiskey. Take care, everybody. Stick around, Mark. We'll get you on the other side.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye,
Mark.
everybody.
Awesome. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you again. I'm so grateful.